Every face hides a story. Behind quiet streets, warm homes, and familiar eyes lies something colder, crueler.
When the mask slips, when the truth comes out, we see what's hidden behind their veil of humanity. True stories, dark truths, just the facts, and what devastation is left behind.
What is up, my crime crazy people? Welcome back for another episode of Veil of Humanity. I am your current host, Courtney. I am a producer and editor on the podcast, and I am bringing you my own segment called See the Evil, Find the Hope, where we have 3 segments. One is called Dead to Rights, where we cover inmates who have been or are currently on death row. The second is Fugitivus, where we cover those on the run from the law. And the final is called Lights On, formerly known as Safety in the first couple of episodes. So let's dive on in. This is Veil of Humanity. The mask is off. Are you ready to look? Let's dive into our first segment, Dead to Rights. They've heard the sentence, they've walked the long corridor, and they've waited, with their lives hanging in the balance. Welcome to our first segment, Dead to Rights. This is where we go behind bars and beyond the headlines to tell the stories of those sentenced to die. Some claim innocence, some never showed remorse, and some left behind questions that may never be answered. From courtroom drama to last statements, from the crimes that put them there to the consequences that followed. Because when the state says your life is over, the world deserves to know why. So let's begin. May 15th, 1985, Devin Moore is born to Kenneth Moore and Gloria Thompson. Nearly 4 decades later, he sits on death row, convicted of a triple murder that shook a small Alabama town and reignited a national debate. Do violent video games cause violent behavior? 7,293 days. That is how long it's been since the early morning of June 7th, 2003. It was 3 a.m. when 18-year-old Devin Moore was brought into the Fayette Police Department, arrested for suspicion of driving a stolen vehicle. Moore had claimed that he had bought the car from a crackhead in Jasper for $500. 2.5 hours later, Officer Arnold Strickland unlocked Moore's handcuffs to begin fingerprinting. What happened next would leave 3 men dead and a town shattered. Moore attacked Strickland, seized his Glock 40 caliber service weapon, and shot him twice. In under a minute, Moore would also shoot Corporal James Crump 3 times in the hallway and fire 5 shots through glass at dispatcher Leslie Ace Mealer. All 3 men died from a gunshot wound to the head. Moore then fled the station in a stolen police cruiser, only to be captured just hours later in Lowndes County, Mississippi. His statement upon arrest shocked many. He had stated, "Life is a video game. Everybody's got to die sometime." Once in custody, Moore confessed very quickly. He claimed Officer Strickland had told him he would face up to 3 years, and that was enough to push him over the edge. Moore showed no emotion except when told he could no longer pursue a career in the military, and not once did he mention video games. So just to dive in a little bit more into the victims that we had during this case, we have Officer Arnold Gunther Strickland, 55. He had served the Fayette County since 2000. Officer James Eddie Crump, who was 40 and had dedicated nearly a decade to law enforcement, and Leslie Frank Ace Miller, 38, a trusted voice on the radio, who was also a volunteer deputy. So, cut to 2005, Moore pleaded not guilty. His defense argued that the violent video games, specifically Grand Theft Auto, had contributed to his actions. They claimed he also suffered from PTSD from his childhood abuse. But regardless of that, in August 2005, Devin Moore was convicted, and on October 9th of that same year, he was sentenced to death by lethal injection. As of September 2025, he remains on death row at Holman Correctional Facility. District Attorney Chris McCool put it bluntly, and I quote, "If that doesn't deserve the death penalty, I don't know what does." Now, 39 years old, Moore still awaits his final fate, and in his own words, "If it's God's will that I live longer, then I will. If he calls me onto heaven, then that is where I will be." This case brought even bigger questions. Grand Theft Auto is a very popular game. This case really brought up the question, can video games influence violent minds? And yet, even in this case, Mr. Moore is used as an example. And there was even a case you can look into called Strickland v. Sony, where it really brought in the highlight of, does violence beget violence? Regardless of that, behind the scenes, behind the headlines, 3 lives were lost, gone forever, and their community still grieves them. Some questions may never have clear answers, but the consequences are painfully real. I want to start this segment off by giving a shout out to my favorite true crime podcast, Crime Junkie. Not only do they consistently bring stories that need national attention to millions of people, but they were actually where I heard about this case. I'll put in the show notes the direct link to their website and to this specific show. Let's dive on in. They vanished into the shadows, evading justice, leaving behind victims and unanswered questions. This segment is where we shine a spotlight on the men and women still on the run from the law. Each case we cover is real, each fugitive is wanted, and someone out there knows where they are. We'll break down what happened, who they are, how they disappeared, and what you can do to get that information, should you have it, to the right people. Because justice is delayed, it is not denied. It was June 19th, 2017, when police in Idaho were dispatched to 216 South Kidd Road, KCID, just outside of Caldwell, for a routine welfare check. What they found was anything but routine. Inside a shed on the property, police discovered the bodies of 3 people: 56-year-old Cheryl Baker, 48-year-old Naja Medley, and Miss Medley's 14-year-old daughter Peyton. Alongside them were the bodies of 3 dogs. All of them had been shot to death. This was a property that all 3 women had reportedly been living, and one man connected them all, Michael Bollinger, Cheryl's husband, and the only suspect in this homicide. The first red flag didn't even come from police. It came from one of Peyton's friends, who reported she hadn't heard from Peyton since June 6th, nearly 2 weeks before the bodies were discovered. While the exact date of the murders hasn't been publicly confirmed, many people believe it happened on June 8th or 9th, meaning that the bodies had been there for a minimum of 10 days in the summer heat. And Bollinger, he vanished soon after. Within days, his car was discovered abandoned in Bridger-Teton National Forest, an incredibly remote and rugged area of western Wyoming. No body, no sightings, no confirmed leads.
It's an unsolved crime that folks in Canyon County are still talking about, and now the sheriff is speaking out. 1 year after 3 female victims were found dead off of KCID Road in Canyon County, each dying from a single gunshot, detectives are still on the case. All of the victims, including a 13-year-old girl, had close ties to the man police believe is responsible, Gerald Mike Bullinger. Witnesses placed the suspect in Ogden, Utah, and a clue pointed investigators to a remote area near the Wyoming border. That's where the suspect's car was discovered, a place where Sheriff Karen Donahue believes Bullinger still is.
Sheriff Donahue of Canyon County later stated, "I think the case is solved, 100% solved. With the forensic evidence we have and the facts of the case, we have solved the crime. But while the evidence may point clearly to Bullinger, the truth remains. He has never been found." And the sheriff is the first to admit that's not real closure for the families of Cheryl, Naja, and Peyton. So where did he go? What happened to Mr. Michael Bullinger? Sheriff Donahue believes that Bullinger likely took his own life somewhere in the forest, or possibly died from exposure or an animal attack. And while Bullinger actually had survival skills, Donahue doubts that he could have made it through the brutal Wyoming winter without serious prep. Still, the case remains active, and the murder warrants for Bullinger are still open. Investigators are keeping tight-lipped. They haven't released autopsy results, or even whether the murder weapon was ever found. I will say, in the Crime Junkie episode, it has an update where we did get a list of what was in Mr. Bullinger's car, and they did find a weapon, but they refused to confirm whether or not it was the murder weapon. They also found a holster for another weapon, but that one was never found as far as I'm aware. Now, more than 8 years later, Michael Bullinger is still missing, and while tips have grown scarce, authorities continue to urge the public to remain alert. Here's a few descriptive details and some skills that Mr. Bullinger had. Full name was Michael D. Bullinger. He is 6'1". He, at the time of the murders, weighed about 240 pounds. He could have gained weight or lost it. Caucasian, brown eyes. He has or had gray hair, but it could have been dyed, could still be gray. He was known to wear glasses. He is currently 68 years old. He is a licensed pilot and has traveled extensively and is familiar with the western United States and Alaska. He's also an avid outdoorsman and has experience in survival skills. If you think you've seen Michael Bullinger, or if you know anything about his case, no matter how small, please contact the official tip line at 833-3-PURSUE or submit a tip online. I will include that information in the show notes as well as a picture of Mr. Bullinger. 3 innocent lives were stolen: Cheryl, Naja, and Peyton, and their families are still waiting for justice, or at the very least, some answers. Michael Bullinger is still a wanted man. He may be dead, he may still be out there, but this case is not over. Moving on to our next segment, Lights On. Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one only remembers to turn on the light. This segment, the rename was inspired by Harry Potter. I'm a very big Harry Potter fan. And Albus Dumbledore is someone who knows how to tell you to ask for help. So we highlight the people who can give help. So if you're not sure where to start, you can start here. Here we highlight the work of advocates, share resources for survivors, because true crime isn't just about darkness. It's about finding the light and turning it on for those who need it most. And today, the organization we are highlighting is the National Center for Victims of Crime. Their support isn't just about healing, it's about justice. Not just for the criminal system, but for the victims who have to live with the consequences of crime long after headlines fade. The National Center for Victims of Crime was founded in 1985 by Ala Isham and Alexander Orisberg after their mother became a victim of crime, and they experienced firsthand how the criminal justice system often fails the very people it's supposed to protect. What they found was something that too many families discover. Victims weren't just being ignored. They were being re-victimized by a system that offered them no voice, no resources, and no healing. So they did something about it. What began as the Sonny von Bullow National Victim Advocacy Center has now become the National Center for Victims of Crime. They're one of the leading national resource and advocacy organizations for crime victims and the professionals who support them. At its core, the mission of the National Center is simple but powerful: to forge a national commitment to helping victims. They're here to serve individuals, families, communities, the nation, everyone. Their vision is one of a safer, more compassionate society, one that prioritizes healing, promotes victims' rights, and works to reform the systems that too often leave victims behind. So what do they actually do? They provide direct services to victims, including attorney referrals, confidential helplines, and interactive trainings. They partner with local, state, and federal organizations to secure rights, protections, and resources for victims of all types of crimes. But what makes them stand out is something they call parallel justice. What does that mean exactly? It means justice doesn't stop with punishing the offender. True justice means giving the victim a chance to heal, physically, emotionally, and financially. It means giving them a seat at the table, a voice. Simple fairness. If you or someone you know is a victim of a crime, there is help available right now. Victim Connect is a confidential and compassionate referral helpline for all victims of crimes. You can call or text them at 1-855-4-VICTIM or use the online chat victimconnect.org. They're available Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They also have a 24-hour hotline where you can call, text, or chat. Their number is 844-443-5732, or you can chat with them at dcvictim.org. Every victim deserves to be heard. Every survivor deserves to be believed. And every community deserves to be part of a system that values healing as much as it values justice. The National Center for Victims of Crime is leading that movement. One call, one case, one voice at a time. We will link all of the phone numbers and chats down below in the show notes. And until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and remember, help is always just a click or a call away. That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any cases you would like us to cover, please reach out to us at veilofhumanity@gmail.com. If you could also drop a like, a subscribe, a follow,